Hello, and welcome to the Transforming Loneliness interview series. I'm Laura Parker, the creator and host of the series. Transforming Loneliness approaches loneliness with fresh and unexpected ways of seeing and responding that cultivate connection, belonging, and love. Today, I'm very happy to be with Sasha Cagen. Sasha Cagen is the author of the cult favorite book, Quirky Alone, a manifesto for uncompromising romantics, a landmark book putting a new twist on being a discerning single that got attention everywhere from the New York Times to CNN. Sasha works as a life coach for women and men who are drawn to the Quirky Alone philosophy of not settling in life or love. What first drew me to Sasha and her work about 15 years ago is her fresh, innovative, culture-bending outlook. At a relatively young age, Sasha had the inspiration and courage to honor her creative vision and to bring it into the world. I believe that healthy, life-affirming human culture encourages innovators like Sasha, and I'm so glad to have her here with me today. Thank you, Sasha, and welcome.
Thank you, Laura. That was so nice. Such a nice introduction.
Thank you, yeah. So I'm sure our listeners would be really interested to hear what Quirky Alone is.
So Quirky Alone is this word that I came up with, as you're right, at a pretty young age. I think I was 25 when I first came up with the word Quirky Alone, and I merged the two words Quirky Alone together to mean a person who can be comfortable being single and wants to be in a relationship, but it has to be like a great relationship. And so the Quirky Alone movement was born even before there was a book that was published 5 years later that really spread the concepts far and wide. And Quirky Alone was a movement in the sense that all of these people who had, like me, even at that young age, felt like there was something wrong with us because we had been single for longer than, I don't know, a year, 2 years, 3 years, all your life, who knows? But the story that we grew up with was that we were supposed to be in a relationship. So when I created the Quirky Alone concept, it was that way of sort of flipping the shame on its head to be a stance of pride and say, well, maybe I'm single because I want a certain type of relationship, and I want to be really happy and compatible with a partner, and that's why I'm single. So that's Quirky Alone. There's also Quirky Together, which is being quirky alone in a relationship. In the book, I also talk about being a quirky slut. So it's like you're not necessarily celibate if you're quirky alone. And of course, there are many permutations, and every Quirky Alone is unique. There is really no, one way. But it's like planting a flag in the ground that says, I'm single. I think you use the word discerning. I think discerning is a good one. I'm single because I'm discerning, and I'm standing up for what I really want. So I think that's basically what Quirky Alone is and stands for.
Yeah, so it really shifts this, reframes the idea of there's something wrong with me because I'm single to there's something right with me, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm making decisions, I'm making choices. I think you use the word uncompromising, and can you say more about, you also say in your bio that Quirky Alones don't settle in life or love. Can you say a little bit more about not settling?
So a woman actually asked me about this the other night when I was having a drink with her, because she's like, you work with these people who don't settle, but what does that mean? Because, maybe I think not settling is really personal for each person, what that means. And, there could be someone who thinks not settling means like he has to drive a Jaguar. I don't know. I mean, there could be a way that a person could think of not settling that is very deep, or it could be those list of requirements that maybe are not the most profound qualities of the person or a relationship. To me, what I mean about not settling is that you have like an eternal sense of alignment in yourself when you're in the relationship. Like you feel like you yourself are supported, you're supporting the other person, and that it's a relationship that lifts you up, maybe in general, more than it drags you down. And I think we're going to talk a little bit later about how my ideas from Quirky Alone have changed. I think one thing that I've recognized in the 18 years since this concept has existed is that, relationships, of course, take compromise. Of course, both people have to work to find each other. So Quirky Alone isn't saying like be selfish or just do it your own way all the time, but that we all have a sort of deep sense in ourselves about relationships that sort of make both people bigger versus ones that are really stagnant or dragging us down.
Yeah, and I'm sure both with your work as a life coach and mine as a therapist, like I know that you and I have encountered people, and maybe we've even done this ourselves, where we're so interested in making the relationship work that we may sacrifice certain very core values or core needs,
Right.
and that becomes really unbalanced, and it's not a recipe for success, or happiness in life. And that sounds like what you're saying is that the Quirky Alones really want to stay true. It's not to the exclusion of the other person, but there's staying true to an inner guidance system or something like that.
Yeah, and I think in a way, uncompromising is really honest. It's about being honest with yourself and honest about what you need and honest about what you see in the other person. So, in a codependent relationship, which it wasn't even clear to me what codependency was in real life until I started working with people, but I could see that in clients who were just clearly not taking care of themselves within a relationship and not sort of being true to what was going on. So, in a way, I think the Quirky Alone people are very admirable in the sense that they're very honest about what's going on. They don't lie to themselves. They don't stay in relationships. A Quirky Alone stance is not to stay in a relationship for 10 or 20 years because it's comfortable or because it's better for the kids. I think that the uncompromising really has to do with not being willing to lie to yourself in a certain way. And there's a courage in that. To step out from the crowd of what everyone else is doing, and perhaps that means getting divorced, or perhaps that means you were always single. But the courage, the alone part isn't about being alone. It's not that you want to be alone forever or that you even ever want to be single, but you're willing to go to a wedding alone or be single because you prefer to be true to yourself.
Yeah, so the way that you're framing it is really in terms of strengths. That's how, that there's a lot of strength in being able to kind of go against the grain, like go to a wedding alone or go to a movie alone,
Right, absolutely. And that's been the conversation I've had with clients who didn't see that strength in themselves and the story that there's something wrong with them or because they're a certain age and single is so strong. And it just as you're sort of pointing out globally, like my work one-on-one is sort of pointing out the courageous choices they've made to be true to themselves, even if what they really want is a relationship. But, it takes guts to be honest about a relationship not really working and to choose being alone, for example.
Yeah. So this brings us into this topic of what you have called single shame. And I think you've already alluded to it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can describe a little bit more about what that is and also how you work with it.
So single shame is one of the things that I've sort of named since the Quirky Alone book came out. So Quirky Alone came out in 2004. But especially since 2012, I've come back to myself as a quirky person to have this business that's in large part serving Quirky Alone type people. So I've created a lot more content and been working with people. And single shame is one of those things that I've named as my own experience and what I saw in clients. And so basically, single shame describes that feeling that you think that something is wrong with you because you have not been in a relationship for longer than seems to be normal. So if I'm on a date and someone asks me how long it was since my last relationship, if I'm in a single shame state, I don't even want to answer the question because it's like, oh my God, it's 5 years, it's 3 years, it's 10 years. It feels so bad. And I think that's going to disqualify me from being a desirable date or potential girlfriend because I've been single too long. So single shame, I think, describes that particular heaviness of not being able to open up. And then also generally like feeling like something's wrong with you, like no one would want a relationship with you because you've been single so long, and maybe even not doing social activities or going out because you're ashamed of still being single or being single. So it's sort of like this whole force that pushes people into themselves because they're not approving of themselves so strongly.
Right. So, as you're talking, I'm thinking, one, I can see how it kind of creates itself. Like if you tend to like pull into yourself because of shame, then you're less likely to be, kind of going out and expressing yourself in a way that, is inviting or engaging with others. And then the other thing that you said was something just at the very end, and I'm having a moment where I'm not remembering what it was that you said, so I'm embarrassed. Can you?
Don't be ashamed.
So you were talking about, let's see, you were talking about single shame. Oh, you mentioned approval, self-approval. So it seems like that's the antidote. Can you say more about how do you help people? Because I think, I encounter this too in my work and in my relationship with myself. I know exactly what you're talking about. There's certain questions people will ask about my relationship history that feels like, ugh, I don't want to answer that question. So, and I know that is because there's this interpretation like there's something wrong with me, rather than, this has been the evolution of my mysterious, unique life that I am not 100% in charge of how it goes. Like there's moments of feeling like I kind of know what's going on and I'm in charge. And then there's other moments when life takes over and it has its own ideas of who I'm going to encounter, what I'm going to encounter, And so I feel like in those moments when I can see my life as more this mystery that I'm not in charge of, then I'm able to deal with this, being single when I don't want to. I'm able to meet that experience much more creatively. But I'm wondering about self-approval and how you help people to cultivate that, because I think it can be really challenging to accept something that is painful and that is not what people really want. If we don't want to be single, it's very hard to accept it,
Yeah. Well, I want to say, I think what you described about accepting the mystery of life and that we're not in full control is a beautiful way of thinking of it, because it's true. And, it's not like we ourselves should be so up for judgment by that other person. So I love the way you said that. And then as far as how I work with people around this, it really is different for each person. But what I've noticed as a pattern is that usually we look at the history of relationships and being single. And usually there's one or two experiences with someone else that left some mark of great shame and just feeling like there was something wrong with the person and that they were never going to be accepted in a relationship. So, usually by looking at that story and talking about it, we can kind of see that clearly and realize that that person doesn't have to believe that so strongly now, that there's a lot of circumstances that have changed and that message has been internalized to a place where it's become truth, but it's not. And then there's just this place of, I think, seeing a person's own strength and beauty. And I'm thinking of this one guy that I worked with who was in his 60s, who's so sweet and self-aware, and a guy that I feel confident that a lot of women would want to have a relationship with. But because he didn't want a traditional relationship and had met other women who did, he was convinced that no woman would ever want to be with him. And from my perspective of starting the Quirky Alone movement, I know there are a lot of women in their 60s who would just love to be with a guy who doesn't necessarily want to live together and, doesn't want a total merging in every way. So, in working with him, there was a process of helping him see himself differently, and even writing like a personal ad to describe exactly what he was looking for,
Mm.
and sort of in that way owning his story. Like there's the, sort of working through the shame, I think lands up with owning who you are, and ultimately being able to put that out there so that others could connect with you.
Yeah, so owning your story, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what Brene Brown said was the most courageous thing you could do, and I think it's really true. I mean, I myself am writing a memoir that maybe we're going to talk about, that is my own story, and it is, I
You
myself
can mention
struggle
it
with
now.
this,
Go
with
ahead and
talking about
mention it now since it's
Sure,
there.
okay. Okay, sure. Well, I'm writing a memoir now that is sort of the follow-up to Quirky Alone, because it's my own story of being single and wondering why that was, really, and going off to South America and having all these sexual, sensual travel experiences that ultimately helped me see that this experience of abuse that I had had as a child had locked in me a lot of negative messages about lack of self-worth, and staying silent, and just not understanding the overreactions I had to people that seemed like too strong in relationship. So ultimately, I realized through all my different experiences that were not just therapy, but also dancing and relationships that had gone awry, that really that that experience of childhood sexual abuse really marked me in a way that needed to be deeply healed, and many things that I thought about myself had to be changed. And so the book is owning that story, and it's like, God, I mean, it's terrifying, but of course it feels very liberating to do. I mean, talking to you now is like, I don't know, maybe the third or fourth time I've talked about it publicly, and I've been working on this book for seven years. Is that
Mm.
possible? Six? Something like that. It's so far. Like there's shame about that. Like, oh my God, it's been going on so long. But it's a very deep thing. And I do feel like what's really beautiful on the other side of owning your story is that feeling of being seen, and that it's okay, and it's really liberating. And so, that goes for writing a memoir, and it also goes for sharing your story on a date. They're all different ways of just sharing with someone your whole story. And I think it's what we're all longing for in a way. It really is to be seen and held and accepted, and that it's okay being who we are.
Right. And I can hear how, like when you were saying that about being seen, and how I immediately went to, and that's what's loneliness is, like the longing to be seen and the feeling like you aren't. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things loneliness is, the more I go into loneliness, the more I find, oh, it's this elusive thing that can't be nailed down. And that's one thing that I kind of enjoy about this topic, actually, because it's
Mm.
always changing, but anyway,
Uh-huh.
one aspect of it is this longing to be seen, and that of course
Mm-hmm.
if we're not sharing our story, then we're not going to be seen. And so it seems like one aspect that's primary is the self-acceptance, the kind of coming to terms with, yes, this is my story, this is who I am, right now I am
Mm-hmm.
this age, I am living in this place, I am, having these circumstances, and my life up to this point unfolded to this. And
Mm-hmm.
then certain things have happened, and it sounds like you really saw some connections between this early experience of abuse and then some overreactions you had and some self-concepts you had, and you saw some value of really, or some necessity of embracing this story, um, in order to move forward and be liberated in a way that you wanted to in your life,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we had a little pre-conversation before this, but this story is directly connected to me having the relationship that I would consider was the deepest romantic relationship I had in my life. And that came about because I had done this work to understand myself and why I had these reactions to arguments or shame, or, basically I would have shame attacks that I don't know if there's a technical word like panic attack, but I would have shame attacks of sort of curling into myself in a ball. And before I did all this work, I was really sort of clueless about why I reacted that way. And I had the feeling that I was undateable and unlovable because of that. And so doing all this work with myself, like I said, not just through therapy, but also through tango and through lots of sexual healing and just lots of stuff, I learned so much. And then I could understand myself and therefore explain myself to a partner. And we're not just talking about relationships with partners here, but for me, a very important relationship is with a partner. And to know that I could tell my story to a partner and have it be seen and held and loved and not be rejected, it was like absolutely life-changing for me. It was like a before and after. So, and that was because I approved of myself enough to do it. And I think that's where this funny thing comes in, where we say in our culture, you have to love yourself to love someone else. And then some people say, no, but you really have to love other people. And it gets all confusing. But I think that it's exactly what we're talking about. You have to approve of yourself enough to let yourself be seen. And then someone can love you because they see you. And I think that's the key place.
Yeah. And then, so there's two things that you're saying that are really standing out for me. One is the relationship between trauma and shame, and how, what you're talking about, this shame attack where, we kind of go into this, we implode, and then the impact that has on our ability to be able to relate, and connect, that's huge. And then the other thing you said, and I'm having another moment where I forgot, I'm trying to highlight something because I want to comment on it, and I'm not remembering what it was, but oh well. I should.
It's all there.
Notes. Yeah. Yeah. So, just the way that it has led to so much growth for you, and how you've had to have an enormous, I know what it was. This thing about you have to love yourself before you can love others. And then you're saying, no, well, other people say, no, you have to love other people. And I've grappled with that same one. Is it a chicken or an egg, and what comes first? And so it seems like what we're talking about is there needs to be this primary ability to be with and own and accept, this is who I am. But I still think that there's something that facilitates that, like what allows us to be able to do that. And I do think to some extent, our relationships with others, like others who don't see us the same shaming way that we see ourselves, can help us to kind of loosen that grip. And so it is a chicken and egg thing, and it's really hard to say what comes first. But I do know that,
Absolutely. And I can't say that I got to that place of loving myself alone. I got to that place of loving myself because of many different moments of being with other people who had seen me in that shame place and accepted me and helped me understand what was going on. And that was everything from a therapist to a new friend to other older friends, or many relationships. So it was a really gradual process. And I really think this thing of learning to own who you are and love yourself and stand up for yourself is quite a huge journey, and usually very gradual. It has like a lot of moments. And then, for me, there was that moment of sharing with a partner that stood out, but there were many moments of being courageous with letting other people see me. And I think with trauma healing, it really is what anybody wants is just someone to, they say in Spanish, acompañar, I think it's the perfect verb for it, just to be present and accept the other person. It's not like you really have to do that much, but just sort of say, I'm here, I'm with you, and not reject or abandon the person. I think it's people just want to be seen and sort of have someone be with them through that moment.
Right. And so I love that phrase. It's the Spanish word acompañar. That's wonderful. Beautiful. Yes. To be accompanied, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's what I do as a coach for people, and I think that's what a therapist did for me. And that's what friends can also do. So I don't know. It's like finding those people in your life who you can open up to. It's really, I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, the opening up, I kind of like to think of it, I love this word reciprocity. And and
Mhm.
and I see it as, giving and receiving. Like we do have to open our hearts and let ourselves out. And then we also, you know, have to be courageous and let other people in, and both of
Mhm.
those require their own kinds of courage, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just wondering if there's anything else you might want to say just about, we alluded to this earlier, just about how your Quirky Alone work has evolved since its inception to now. And maybe you've already addressed most of it in our conversation, but if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Mhm. Well, I think that I'll just say what I've already said, but in a more abstract way, is that when I first wrote Curriculum, I hadn't done any of this healing in myself, and I also wasn't a coach and worked with people about their relationship issues. And so when I was in my mid to late 20s, I sort of thought like, well, if a relationship is too much work, then it's not the right relationship. And that's what I thought then. And now I think, there is still a point when a relationship, if it's too much work, it's not the right relationship. But I see the work of relationship as really sacred and a way of growing to love another person, to love ourselves. And so now personally, I welcome that work because I think that it makes me a better person, even if the relationship doesn't last that long or forever. And yeah, I just see it as much more valuable work. And I think I had a kind of naivete at the time when I was so much younger about like, you meet that person and it's just going to work. And now I can see all of the barriers I have within myself. Like, I'm not that easy of a person to be with. Like, I had a lot to do to become a better person to be in a relationship with.
Hmm.
And that's good. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think before, because of my shame issues, I think it was like I didn't welcome those challenges as much. And I thought like it was almost like a relationship was a product that I would buy. And it was like the perfect thing would come in because he was the right guy, looked the right way. And now I just see it as so much more dynamic and a co-creation and something that's worthy of the work, let's say. And a lot of people have this idea about me that it's like happy single girl because she wrote Quirky Alone. But actually, I really like being in a relationship and I value that work. I also think I can be great single. I've just broken up with someone now and I'm doing great. Like I'm doing, I think I've gotten better at this whole process and I see how being single also gives me lots of time and energy, and it's always a search toward what do I really want. And so every relationship helps me better define that. So yeah, I mean, I think basically just the work of valuing a relationship is for me personally what's changed and wanting to make that visible because I got a little bit like feeling not seen myself by my own movement because I was worried that people would look online and read quickly and think this girl just wants to be single. And that has never actually been the truth.
Right. The truth is you want a relationship, but you want a certain kind of relationship.
Yeah. And I can be good being single too. That's also true. And I'm much better at being single than most people. But it's not like that's the end of the story.
Yeah. And it seems like what you're saying, I just want to highlight this, is that when you early on, like you said, you thought that if a relationship's difficult, it's not the right relationship. And that also it sounds like the difficulty itself would bring up your own issues. Like I know for myself, like
Mm-hmm.
when difficulty comes up, it could be like holding a mirror up that's saying, hey, you're not good at this and you have no idea how to do that and you're really freaked out by this. And so there might be a tendency to just go into the shame spiral around, oh,
Exactly.
I just don't know how to do this. And it sounds like you've reframed it to when those difficulties come up, you've worked enough with your issues to be able to accept yourself instead of saying, oh, I need to retreat and hide now because these issues are exposed. you know, like you
Mm-hmm.
can face them, you can engage with them. They're not going to make you want to retreat quite so much, you know. Sounds like.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not like I still could have a shame attack and I could still have problems, but I sort of know the map of how this works, and that I can get out of that ball place and open up to the person and see, like, can the person handle this?
Yeah.
So now I think I welcome that difficulty, because you're right. I
Mm,
see it as a mirror, and I think that there are ways we can grow in relationship that are hard to grow when we're single,
good
or hard to
point.
find when we're single. So, for me, the point was never to be single my whole life. I also think there are ways we can grow when we're single that we can't in a relationship necessarily. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just welcoming what that mirror brings, whether it's a person telling me I'm the greatest ever, or it's showing me something about myself that could use some attention.
Right. Yeah, but being able to stay in the game, you know, rather than,
Mm-hmm.
you know, throwing your tennis racket down and walking off the court, you know. So that's
Exactly.
part of it too, you know, is just staying in the game. And like you said, you're actually welcoming those challenges more now. That's
Mm-hmm.
very refreshing to think about it as, you know, this is all about learning and growing, you know, and relationships a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful place to do that, as well as being single is a wonderful place to do that too. So
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I think this might be a good place for us to wind up. And I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else, anything that you want to let our listeners know about the work you're doing now? I know you have some tango adventures you're offering and some other things. So what would you like our listeners to know?
Mm. Well, first thing I think is sign up for the newsletter, because that can make you a little bit less lonely, because you'll have the Quirky Alone perspective coming to you. So that will kind of give you the sense that you're part of something bigger than yourself, which is, I think, what a lot of people want to feel when they're single, especially, that you're not the only one going through these questions and challenges. And then otherwise, I'm working with people one-on-one. So if something calls to you that I could help you with, you can reach out to me. And I have these tango adventures in Buenos Aires as part of my own life journey. I wound up leaving San Francisco and moving to Buenos Aires most of the time, because it's been a great place for me to work on this book, and because I'm in love with tango and obsessed with tango. If you're lonely and need physical contact, there's a whole other aspect here about touch starvation, that a lot of single people don't get enough touch. So tango can be an amazing way to kind of recontact with other people, and um, develop your own sensuality without container, with boundaries. So if you're interested in exploring that, you can look at the Tango Adventure on my page. We have a group Tango Adventure coming up next year, and then I'm going to offer it in a different way, where it's like, well, I'm going to explain it soon, but you'll be able to come for Tango Adventures at more times of the year. So if
Wonderful.
that sounds dreamy and interesting, you can check it out.
Sounds great. And that's another whole topic we could explore, is the touch starvation, but we'll have to save that for another
Mm-hmm.
time. But I love
Yeah.
that aspect as well, and I can really relate to that. So Sasha, thank you so much for bringing your far-ranging, courageous self to this conversation, and for the really powerful, innovative work you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I think it's an amazing summit to organize around this topic. So thank you for having me.